Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Your Highness, Sheikh Salman bin Khalifa Al Khalifa, advisor to His Royal Highness Prince Khalifa bin Salman Al Khalifa, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, and the representative of His Royal Highness Prince Khalifa here today. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the second day of the 26th World Islamic Banking Conference. My name is Mustafa Adil. I am the head of Islamic Finance at Refinitiv, and it is my honor to be your master of ceremonies for the day. We had a fascinating first day yesterday, where we heard from experts sharing their insights on various topics, including the global economic outlook, harmonization of the industry across new markets, emerging trends in fintech, and the impact of M&A activity and consolidation in the region. We also witnessed the WIBC Performance Awards at the gala dinner last night, where we saw a number of institutions win awards in over 14 different categories, including regional performance awards, global performance awards, awards for CSR and sustainable finance initiatives, and a number of new awards that have been added this year, including awards related to the fastest growing fintech initiatives, awards related to the best digital banks, and awards honoring some of the enablers of the recent M&A activity that we have seen in the region. Day 2 promises to be equally as exciting, with a number of sessions that are covering many of the key topics and mega trends that are impacting the Islamic finance industry today, including the alignment between the objectives of Sharia and Islamic finance, the growth of the sukuk market, economic cooperation, sustainable finance and CSR initiatives, SME and financial inclusion, as well as opportunities presented to the Islamic finance industry by the broader Islamic economic sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, I would just like to remind you to please download the event app in case you haven't already done so. The app is available in the App Store and Play Store under the title ME Global Advisors. It's an excellent tool that will enable you to engage and connect with the conference. You can ask questions to the speakers through the app. You can respond to the audience poll questions that have been pre-prepared to share your feedback and insights on the topics in question. And you can also set up meetings with speakers and delegates through the event app. I would also invite you to stay connected to the conversation through social media using our official hashtags WIBC 2019, and 26 years of WIBC, our two official hashtags. Please join the conversation and have your say on the topics that we're going to be discussing today. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of MEGA, Middle East Global Advisors, the organizers of this event, I would like to take this opportunity to thank, first and foremost, the Central Bank of Bahrain for their continuous support and guidance for this conference. We would like to thank all the speakers for being here with us today. And finally, we would like to thank our partners, exhibitors, supporting partners, and media partners, without whom this event would not be possible. With that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first session of the day. And the session covers a topic that is very close to my heart. I'm sure many of you feel the same way, and that is the objectives of Sharia and Islamic finance. Many of us here today are motivated and working to develop the Islamic finance industry as a genuine alternative to the conventional banking industry, with its own value proposition, making a positive economic and social contribution to the broader community that it operates in. And I think that all of us can agree that we would not be able to achieve that objective unless we bring the industry closer to the objectives of Sharia and Maqasid Sharia. I'm very pleased to see that we have a fascinating panel that includes representatives from regulators, standard setting bodies, Islamic banks, and the scholarly community that can talk on the topic, which is titled The Objectives of Sharia and Islamic Finance, Current Landscape, and Where Are We Headed? I hope that the panelists today can give us genuine assessment of where we stand today in regards to Maqasid Sharia and provide us a direction to ensure that we continue to grow and develop in the right way for the industry. And with that, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to invite the moderator for the session, Mr. Sohaib Umar, the advisor on Islamic financial services development at the Central Bank of Bahrain, to come to the stage and introduce his panel and his speakers. Sohaib, the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A very good morning and Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. If you ask a 10-year-old, what is more important, the form or the structure or the substance, the spirit, he or she will tell you it's the spirit. Yet, what is obvious to a 10-year-old is somehow not so obvious to a $2.5 trillion Islamic finance industry, which is largely based on legal stratagems, ruses, and technicalities. A $2.5 trillion industry which is today searching for its soul. Maqasid Sharia, or objectives of Sharia, could provide a way to find its soul. And this is the topic for our panel discussion today. We have with us a nice collection of people representing Sharia scholars, regulators, bankers, and standard setters. I would like to request Sheikh Issam Ishaq, a prominent Sharia scholar, to kindly come and take the stage. Mr. Khalid Hamad, Executive Director, Banking Supervision, Central Bank of Bahrain. Mr. Umar Mustafa Ansari, Secretary General, IOFI. Mr. Abdul Hakim Al Khayyat, CEO, KFH Bahrain. These gentlemen need no introduction. Before we formally start the panel, let me ask the audience, we would like to keep it interactive, so please send your questions on the app. If you haven't downloaded, please do that right now. You can also send the question on a piece of paper. We have collectors in the audience, and you can just raise your hand and write the question and send it on to us. Also, there are some poll questions that we would like you to give your opinion on. And if I may ask the organizers to kindly put up the poll questions. You can vote at any time during the session. Okay, let me just first quickly give a background on Maqasid al-Sharia. As we understand, the Sharia scholars tell us, the objective of the Almighty sending down the Sharia is to protect and safeguard the faith, life, intellect, progeny, and property of all mankind. So my first question is to Sheikh Issam. Sheikh, can you enlighten us with the legitimacy of this understanding that which Quranic verse or which Sahih Hadith actually refers to Maqasid al-Sharia, and is it just a jurisprudential interpretation which is subject to various perspectives, or is it something that we can unanimously accept.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Thank you, Suhaib, for this question, and thank you, WIBC, for the privilege of joining this distinguished panel with distinguished panelists here. The issue of Maqasid is something that it's part of the development of Islamic science over time. And we know that in the beginning we had the Quran and the Sunnah. We had the direct revelation, the literal speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam through his translation of these texts into action, and his approvals of the others adopting these various rulings. The sciences, Islamic sciences, were codified. I don't say they were developed, because it might give a wrong implication of something that people read into the text what's not there. No, the Islamic sciences were codified over time as the need arose. So in the first generation, there wasn't, for example, even the collection of the rulings which we now agree to call fiqh. Fiqh was in the earlier centuries just understood to be literally what it means, etymologically what it means, and that is deep understanding. It didn't have this conventional implication that it is the science of the do's and the don'ts regarding rituals and regarding certain transactions and all. Fiqh meant general understanding, deep understanding of religion as a whole. Whether you're talking about doctrines of faith, whether you're talking about ethics, morality, or whether you're talking about rulings. So the point is, these sciences were codified over time as the need arose. The issue of maqasid, if we are talking about finding the word maqasid in the Quran and the Sunnah, no, we will not find the word maqasid in the Quran and the Sunnah. But what does maqasid mean? Maqasid means goals and objectives. Maqasid means the purpose. What's the purpose of this revelation? What is the aim in revealing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, which you pointed to in your introduction. The main purpose of all the rulings in the revelation, we can say, can be abridged in one verse. This is a verse in Surah Al-Nahl, this is Surah number 16. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ يَعِظُكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. Verily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala most certainly commands justice and kindness. And then it goes on to what the ruling prohibit. Now, our scholars have said, whole of Sharia, if we want one verse which has in it the whole of Sharia, all the do's and all the don'ts, it's in this verse. Because this verse is saying all the do's are about justice, and justice not only in any sense. We have to be kind and gentle in meting out justice. We are not abrasive in justice. Even being just and fair, we have to be very kind and gentle in it. For example, just to give you a tangential, not directly in the issue of finance. Cleaning our houses from rodents, right? Now the Prophet ﷺ has told us that if you kill a rodent in one hit, you get so many merits, so many hasanat. But if you kill it in 2 hits, you get less, because you have subjected the poor beast to unnecessary harm. If you then even kill it in 3 hits, you don't manage in the first 2 hits, you will get even less reward. The point is, when you're doing good, when you're doing good, you have to be good in doing good, not just appearing in doing good. So Islam is about equity, it's about fairness, and it's about wholesome fairness, not just technicalities of fairness and technicalities of right and wrong. When we are talking about the maqasid of Sharia in the area of finance, that's very clear. We have very clear texts in this. First of all is that poverty should not be tolerated at all. We should do all that we can to eradicate poverty, not ameliorate poverty, eradicate poverty. to the extent that the Prophet ﷺ, at the end of every prayer of his, used to seek refuge in Allah from poverty and disbelief. He would make a connection between poverty and disbelief. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-faqri wal-kufr. Faqr wal-kufr. Because poverty is very often an avenue to disbelief. Maybe we remember the days of communism. It was very fertile in areas where poverty was prevalent. So poverty has to be eradicated. His first cousin, his son-in-law, Ali ibn Abi Talib, said, if poverty was a man, I would have surely killed him. Poverty cannot be tolerated. We should do everything we can to eradicate poverty. And that's why we have the institution of zakat. And zakat is, of course, if you want to call it a tax, it's not really a tax, but it is analogous to taxes because you have to pay a certain portion of your wealth on an annual basis. But it's very different from taxation systems in that it is based on your wealth and not on your revenue. And then it goes primarily for the benefit of the poor and the destitute, the needy and the destitute, not for general infrastructure projects and the like.
Sheikh, on that, thank you for an excellent explanation. And it coincides with the quotation from Ibn Qayyim, who says that everything that lapses out from justice into injustice, and from mercy to its opposite, and from maslaha to mafsada, and from wisdom into the frivolous, does not belong to the Sharia, even if it is inducted into it by interpretation, ta'wil. So if this is so, and you have very articulately pointed out about the importance of justice in Sharia, then why is it that Sharia scholars have restricted themselves to a purely legalistic and technical interpretation of religion in Islamic finance, largely ignoring the big picture? And even in cases where you know that allowing a product is creating a broader economic or societal issue, you still allow it. Tawarruk comes to mind. Islamic price draw schemes, they come to mind. Why is it that we are having a different concept and a different practice?
I think you have hit upon a very thorny and sensitive topic. I don't think I can do justice to this topic, especially with the time limit that I have, but I can tell you that the Sharia scholars in Islamic finance as a whole, whether we're talking about banking or funds or takaful or whatever, they cannot direct the industry in the sense of which area focus on, what to avoid in terms of what is preferable, not preferable. They can only opine on the compliance with Sharia. Whether or not it's in the general line of maqasid over the long run or the short run. As long as here and now this is not in clear violation of Sharia, this is the mandate of the Sharia boards. And this can only be changed through the regulators. If the regulators want to give the Sharia boards, the Sharia bodies supervising Islamic finance, a larger mandate, so be it. I personally am all for it. But the mandate now is very restricted. You can only opine on the transaction as it is. Is it in compliance with Sharia or not? Whether or not it serves maqasid over the long run or not. So even, for example, in certain ethical issues, for example, there are some financing, project finances in areas where you have, literally, you do have sweatshops. You have sweatshop labor conditions, which is not only it's not Islamic, it's not ethical, and it's downright immoral. But the Sharia board can only opine on the structure of the transaction. Even though it might opine that they would dislike the institution to go and invest in that area, they cannot say it's not compliant if the structure of the transaction is compliant.
So Sheikh, you have passed on the responsibility to the person sitting on your right. Khalid, in the opinion of Sheikh Hissam, it is the duty of the regulator and not the Sharia scholar. Do you agree with that?
I don't think the Sharia scholars would be qualified to basically make a strategic decisions, strategic business decisions. This is not for the Sharia scholars because they are not equipped to do these kind of decisions. They are equipped to guide the institution and the controllers in the institution into what is really what Sheikh Isam mentioned, into achieving the objectives of Sharia, but not to opine on the strategy, business strategy, aside from, of course, giving opinion on whether it's Sharia compliant or not. So it's not advisable to mix the roles. It's good to have the independency, in the business.
So my question to you is, if the form is being taken care of, but the spirit is missing, who is looking into this issue and who has the power to fix it?
This is a very good question, but let's go to the ABCD principle. As Sheikh Isam mentioned, there are, maybe he mentioned it generally, but let me go in a little bit detail. Now, as a human being, you have 4 types of relationships in your life. There is a relationship with God, radiyallahu anhum wa radu an, based on satisfaction. And there's a relationship with individuals. Again, you have to apply justice and fairness. And you have a relationship with institutions. Again, institutions need not to misuse, these persons or to forego their rights and what have you. And there is a relationship with the environment that you're living. Now, in conventional finance, as well as in Islamic finance, there is a term which is similar to Maqasid al-Sharia, but not as comprehensive as Maqasid al-Sharia, which is corporate governance. So if we take out the relationship between the individual and God aside, and we reduce to some extent the relationship between the individual and the environment, then what you have is corporate governance, which is nothing but being fair and justice in everything you do. Not just, some people feel that corporate governance is something to do with the board. No, corporate governance has to do with everything we do. As an individual, as an institution, as a government, everybody is responsible to make sure that he do better governance. التفكير رشيد يعني. So back to your question, what would the regulator do? The regulator will basically make sure, through all the tools available to it, that the institutions and the individuals, and most importantly the controllers in those institutions, adhere to good governance. Now, if we take this step further with regard to Maqasid al-Sharia, there is a big hole to be filled here. And we can start from even universities. Those universities teaching Islamic finance, they teach them, forms, concepts, terminologies, but they don't teach them the objective of Sharia. So when they graduate and they join the institutions, Islamic banks and what have you, and let's say they take the job of a marketing officer. They go to investors and they sell. He has one thing in his mind, that I want to get money out of this guy. He doesn't go to this guy for a good cause. And bear in mind that the difference between conventional finance and Islamic finance is it's not just Sharia compliant. There's a huge difference. The difference here is that you are doing something for your secular life as well as for the day after. While here in conventional finance, you are doing something for secular life. So I hope I answered your question.
Well, let me, thank you for the answer, but let me be the devil's advocate. I'll say, why should a university student bother his time into learning all of this when there is no value for this thing, because the shareholders are not willing to compromise on their returns. The bank managements are focused on making money. Everything else is secondary. The customers will go to the competitors if the rates are even slightly higher. The depositors or the investment account holders, they only care about the rates. And the regulators, they won't accept diversion from Basel or IFRS, etc., or put in the mechanism which enforces this. So if the Sharia scholars are either not bothered or not qualified, and the regulators also don't bother, and the banker is not bothered, and the Sharia, the shareholders and the depositors also, then to me, this looks like something which is there only in concept, but nobody values it, and therefore nobody will learn it.
I think you made life difficult for me, because I think this question requires me to write a book.
Khalid, you'll appreciate.
In every stakeholder, right, there is a long story to be talked about. Whether it's a customer or a shareholder or an investor, or it's a regulator or a Sharia scholar or standard setting bodies, it's a complicated subject, but it all emanates from within. If I care about you as much as I care about myself. I'm not saying, my earlier remark, I didn't say that the regulator should stay away from it. I gave you a comparison as to what is Maqasid al-Sharia in our day's life, or what is the equivalent of Maqasid al-Sharia. There is the nearest equivalent is corporate governance. And the central bank is taking corporate governance very, very, very seriously. It could lead to basically closure of the bank and putting the controllers or the responsible person in jail because of failure, serious failure. What I was saying is that there is a difference between Maqasid Sharia and corporate governance. And what we need to do, starting from universities, is to educate those reading for bachelor degrees, master degrees, PhDs, to basically start with the principles, rather than the forms, the terminologies, the concepts. These you can learn them easy, operational measures or issues and subjects. But you should start with what exactly the objective of Sharia, and then you drill down into the other issues of Islamic finance. If you do this, then at least you could basically address substantial part of the problem.
Thank you. Let me just ask the audience. The debate is heating up, and I hope that you are sending your questions onto the app, and we'll come to that. You wanted to say something?
Yes, I just want to say that this is an ecosystem here. We have Sharia, we have the regulator, and we have the standard setting, and we have the industry. And I think Khalid was trying to say that, look, it's not the business of Sharia to make business decisions. They are there to guide you on Sharia aspects. And he guides you on regulatory aspects. We have standards sitting here to apply accounting and auditing standards and others. And we are the decision makers. We need to comply with all these three. But I think what's important in the discussion here is not the specific outcome of this panel, but rather the talking point of introducing Maqasid al-Sharia into the forum and into, again, back to the banks and the industry, that we need to be mindful of that. And it's a great reminder. Every now and then we forget parts of what we need to do in the Islamic banking industry. And these conferences are great ways of bringing to our attention what we might have become oblivious about, forgetful about, not keeping in mind constantly. And so this great subject have lots of practicalities. We are slightly moving, but we don't have much time from the theory to the practice. And practically, we have lots of issues that we need to deal with. We don't have KPIs yet on Maqasid al-Sharia. And I think probably as an outcome of this conference, we might go back and say, let's have KPIs. KPIs for shareholders on Maqasid al-Sharia, KPIs for customers on Maqasid al-Sharia, KPIs for employees on Maqasid al-Sharia, and KPIs for the environment on Maqasid al-Sharia. We don't have this now. So there could be cooperation between the ecosystem here to produce those KPIs so that we perform better. And I think today, everything about people are looking for what's fair and what's just. And I think the Quran and the Sunnah is all about fairness and justice. The worship of one God is all about justice. And then everything else comes under it is about justice. The verse in the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, page 100, at the top says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا, rich or poor. You have no business in saying he is poor, can take advantage of him, he's rich, I can take more advantage of him. That's not your business. It's for you to do justice. The spirit of the Quran is all justice, justice, justice. From Tawheed to Mu'amalat, the way people deal with one another, socially or financially. So this is the big objective. And all the scholars, all the subjects that have been brought into Maqasid al-Sharia of protecting deen, religion, life, property, progeny, and all these aspects are all about fairness and justice. And so we need to talk about that. And so we have practical issues in the Islamic banking industry and how we should deal with them. For example, take the issue of risk return profiles. And do we need to take higher returns for every internal grading of a riskier client than another? So grade 2 should be getting a better rate than grade 5. Is this what we need to do as Islamic banks when it comes to finance? I fully understand you want a much greater reward and return on your investment. No one could debate that. The higher the risk, the higher the return. But when dealing with people who have different grading, but they are capable at the end of the day to pay, should I have somebody pay 7 and another pays 6? Or treat them equally? Because if I charge the weak higher amounts, higher profits, I make him weaker. And if I charge the richer guy lower amount, I make him richer. Is this what we are all about? Is this something that we need to discuss?
Let me hold you, let me interject on this. I think the suggestion of KPI based on Maqasid al-Sharia is a great one. I think that it needs to develop into something more tangible. And let me ask Umar the question, why is it that IOFI has no standard or guidance on Maqasid al-Sharia? And would it be fair to say that IOFI has been creating the bylanes in the form of Sharia standards, but no superhighway?
This might be a very big statement that you are making, brother. Let's start with the confession. The confession is, yes, we might not be as AOFI or any standard setter body, we might not be doing enough. And we fully agree that we need to work more on that. But it does not mean that we completely ignore that. Like, for example, the most common example that we take normally is tawarruk. Our standard on tawarruk, number one, make sure that the tawarruk is as per full Sharia requirements. Nobody in the industry follows that. Our standard says that it should not be applied on retail basis. It is applied on retail basis. Our standard says that it should not be used to fund or invest in conventional banking and conventional institutions. Everybody does that. So maybe we are not at that much fault. We have worked several years back on an excellent standard on corporate social responsibility. And that standard is all about Maqasid Sharia. It talks about Qarz Hasan, it talks about so many good initiatives, environment, everything that we talk about. It is one of the good standards that we have produced. But the level of adoption, I think people don't even know that we have a standard on that part. And as Brother Khalid was rightly saying, that everything might not be coming from Sharia side. Some of the things might be coming from the governance side. So it is a governance standard that we have. More recently, just for the benefit of audience, we have worked on a very good standard on ethics, and that is based on the Adl and Ihsan paradigm. It's a very good standard. Just try to spare some time to read it. We are trying our level, but all the things might not be coming primarily from the Sharia side, because let me give you a quick example, that whatever is related to Saddu Zarai normally will not be coming from the Sharia side, it would be normally coming from the regulator and government side. Now, quickly I would like to add 2-3 quick things. Number one, we were talking about ecosystem. Now we are stuck in that ecosystem completely. The mindset of the bankers and their stakeholders and their owners is one side. The second side is that we have, yes, some controversial products like tawarruk, some controversial sukuk structures, etc. The third part is the regulatory regimes in which we have higher capital maintenance requirements for the riskier products, which means that if I go for musharka, I need to have high capital put in from my owners, while if I go for an investment in a conventional bank, or if I go to an investment in government sukuk, I have nearly no or very minimal capital requirement. So this regime, this overall model might not be, it was not meant for Islamic banking. It was not developed originally for Islamic banking. It was developed for conventional banking. So we need to work together on that. And one last very quick point, the political will is very important. I would just give you example of the Western European countries and some of the welfare states, as we say, like Canada and others. Like if you see, in 1920s, till 1920s, 30s, they were completely capitalistic systems. But they were afraid of communism coming into them. The labor unions were becoming stronger, the left-wing parties were coming in. So they became afraid of that, and then they started converting their capitalistic governments and capitalistic economic system into welfare states. So that was all because of the political will. And that political will is very important, and it doesn't need that we need to have labor unions for that. Political means that you need to, at least you need to wake up the intellect. We need to wake up those who think within the society, within the system, and you need to talk about that. And one last thing, those Maqasid Sharia are not only the responsibility of Islamic banking. Islamic economic system is not only the responsibility of Islamic banking. Where hoarding is going on, where unfair trade practices are going on, only Islamic banking cannot completely change the whole system. But yes, we agree, we need to work more on that.
Thank you, Umar. You've touched on a number of points. Brother Abdul Hakim, let me ask you a difficult one. Some people are of the opinion that the main issue is that the banker is not serious because he comes from a conventional background with a conventional mindset and he is not willing to change. That is one side of the story. When you ask the banker, he puts the blame onto the shareholder. He says, if I pursue anything but the profits, the shareholder will put me out of business, I'll lose my job. What is the real situation? Is the banker not serious, or is the shareholder not interested?
I think at the core of it is education. I think there isn't enough continuous education of the entire component. There isn't a continuous education on making sure that the employees are aware of Maqasid al-Sharia, and there isn't a complete education to the clients of Islamic banks. Actually, people are almost illiterate when it comes to dealing in financial matters, let alone knowing the intricacies of Islamic banking, which needs a tremendous focus. Shareholders also, they are not uniform, they are not the same. Some are well versed in Sharia and many are not. And so education comes at the core of solving this problem, and this problem does exist. People sometimes forget to put that important line between the way Islamic banks ought to behave as opposed to conventional banks. And that line is blurred in the mind and the eyes of so many people. And education is the solution. Now, have we done enough when it comes to educating our staff, educating our shareholders and our clients? No, we have not. We have not. And this needs to be a talking point. I know the central bank talks about it every now and then, but they're busy with lots of other things and slips. And we're busy with business, financial transactions, and we forget these important ecosystem fundamentals. And we need to go back and assess the level of education of all staff members, especially the front end, the ones that do deal with clients. My experience with clients is that the level of education needs tremendous, not only maintenance, but continuous input. Today, if you ask them what are the requirements of the different standards that come from the different standard setting bodies, they are almost entirely illiterate. They are almost entirely illiterate. And this makes it incumbent on us to achieve Maqasid al-Sharia, to tell them, by the way, you are putting your application at risk of getting a higher charge, a higher profit, a higher administration cost, because you are not complying with 1, 2, 3. They are not necessarily aware. They don't take care of business. But we need to educate them with that. We should not behave like a cutthroat capitalist. We know that we need to do business. We need to be profitable to satisfy our social responsibilities and our shareholders and our employees. We need to be profitable, but we need to be profitable in the right way. And I think, are we always profitable in the right way? Not all the time. We need to really self-criticize, self-assess to come up with solutions that can tackle this problem. And we can't tackle this problem immediately now, but I think we have lots of suggestions in this regard that we can put together to overcome this understanding that we need to make money regardless. We need to really put Islamic banking and the Maqasid al-Sharia at the forefront of our thinking.
Let me take a question from the app. The key issue for profit and loss sharing in Islamic finance is that depositors are not willing to take risks with their deposits. How can we have a profit and loss sharing system when the depositors expect their deposits to be risk-free? Only when depositors are willing to take real risks can banks and regulators then move to build up risk-sharing instruments on the asset side. Please comment. Anybody from the panel?
See, this shows what we are talking about here. Awareness, education. Islamic finance is based on risk sharing. So if the investor or the customer is not aware of this, then you will create a problem. Problem in terms of expectation. Because the customer then, he will expect that the bank will give him a guarantee on his money. That the regulator will find a way to protect his money, right? He has to basically understand that Islamic finance is not like conventional finance. The problem is in the management of Islamic finance and the controllers of Islamic finance. That they basically developed a substance and form which is equivalent to conventional finance, a model which is based on nothing but debt, lending. This is not Islamic finance. Islamic finance is based that I enter into a transaction with you, we share the risk. It's not just pure lending. So there is Islamic finance, cut and paste conventional finance with a labeling. The labeling is different. So there is, I agree with Abdul Hakim, there is a significant need in terms of raising the awareness. The central bank was not idle on this. We have really, called upon the banks a few years back to have a running program of educating their customers on what exactly, Islamic finance is all about. What is the details of each type of contract? What are the objectives? What are the principles? And we made sure that the Islamic banks follow, and develop this. But they are slow. Why? Because they are always busy, making money.
Can I say comment here? On the risk return and the risk taking, the sharing of risk, Islamic banks throughout their history, on average, we have paid much more than the conventional counterparts. Much more. This is after taking care of all the expenses as well. The resilience of Islamic banking is great. This sharing mechanism of profits and losses is what protects the financial system, actually. And this is what happened in many other countries. Because if you were to hit capital immediately with losses, you have a run on the bank. Banks will close, in no time. But with Islamic banking, this sharing gives you multiple strength over conventional banks not to close down in cases of problems, because everybody shares in that. And even at times of crisis, in a similar environment, conventional and Islamic, living in the same country, operating in the same country, everything being equal, even when the entire economy suffers problems, both lose, the Islamic banks will survive and the conventional will not survive. This is a fact. But we are talking about other aspects here. How can we improve the details? And there are lots of the details that really concerns me, because they are ethical questions. When people give us checks, for example, talking about Maqasid al-Sharia, we keep the checks in the vault. 5 years since this, the guy loses his job. There are banks who will just present the check to the police, and they will drag the guy to the court and put him in prison. Lose family, lose Ramadan, lose Eid, they don't care. Should we do this? Absolutely not. When somebody's condition and financial affairs have changed, not because of his own doing, he is not defaulting while capable, his conditions have changed, putting him in jail is entirely anti-Maqasid al-Sharia. Do we have a system whereby we analyze everyone who defaults and check whether this default is genuine or not, to present his check, even to threaten to present the check, because that puts a tremendous injustice in the way he lives. So we need to be careful as Islamic banks on these details. Yeah.
We are running out of time. Khalid, you want to say something?
I just want to, if I may, if you allow me to disagree with what you said, for two reasons. Now, there is the regulatory side, and there is the other side of the equation. Now, from regulatory side, Islamic banks has, over the years, has been have been benefiting a lot, right? Why? Because of this risk-sharing, loss-bearing concept, which they don't apply accurately. And what the result was that the Islamic banks were, gain a competitive edge on the conventional banks when it comes to capital adequacy calculation. To give you more detail, the risk that the Islamic banks is exposed to in any credit risk related assets is much lower than the conventional banks in accordance with the regulatory standards. This means that the amount of capital that the Islamic banks will have to allocate to each risk will be less. And this is a huge competitive advantage, right? And but from the other side, look at the experience in terms of resilience of Islamic banks. What we have seen in Bahrain is the opposite. We've seen exit of Islamic banks, not retail, but investment Islamic banks. Most of them exited the market. Why? Because the business model was wrong. And they have exited or they have converted into a normal commercial companies. So I think there is a need to basically redesign the substance and form of Islamic finance in order for us to benefit from the good thing in Sharia.
Khalid, on that,
Clarify, it's not about investment. I was talking about retail because investment, he's right, because investment is anybody's management style could bring down an entity or not. So I was talking about a proper bank.
Thank you. Khalid, just one last question before we run out of time. And you would appreciate that one doesn't get the opportunity to ask tough questions to his boss every day. So bear with me. So if Islamic banks fail to elevate the... If Islamic banks fail to elevate the level of their ethics and values in line with Maqasid al-Sharia, should the regulator step in and mandate some of these?
You mean mandating some ethical standards?
Some ethical standards, some KPIs to be made mandatory for the Islamic banks to follow.
Well, I mean, for the first, as I mentioned to you earlier, corporate governance is a source of ethical standard. And we have basically, enhanced the corporate governance, and also we introduced Sharia governance, which is even, more robust controls than just corporate governance. And I also, what we've done in the past as a result of the financial crisis, because we saw failure in ethics in the market, we felt that it is important that we take the industry to Ethics 101. So we got engaged with a consultant to develop a course material on ethics, which is nothing but don't steal, don't lie. And we made it mandatory on the junior people or junior staff of the Islamic banks, that this is mandatory, you have to attend, hoping that the future generation will be, inshallah, better. But I think what we need to do more is basically to focus on one stakeholder and intensively, expose that stakeholder to these ethical standards, Maqasid al-Sharia and what have you. And that is the controller. By controller, I mean the major shareholder, who will dictate on the board, who will dictate on the management what is right and what is wrong, what is ethical and what is illegal.
Thank you. Umar, you wanted to say something? Just very quickly, please.
Very quickly, I would just like to add something here, sir. Actually, at times we forget one concept, that is the concept of barakah. When your intention is right, your approach is right, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also help you. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. So I would just like to give you 2-3 examples of some countries. First example is Jordan. Third largest bank is Islamic Bank. The performance of Islamic banking sector has been always positive. Central bank does not support any discount window. There are not enough liquidity instruments available. Tawarruq with conventional banks is not allowed only with Islamic banks, and that is also not being used because all of them having excess liquidity. The sector is doing great, around 15-16% Islamic. Second example, Oman. Yesterday we were discussing. Fastest growing market, no discount window. Every bank cries for liquidity management, but alhamdulillah, the sector is growing at the fastest pace. And even in the Islamic full-fledged are doing good, but particularly the windows are doing much better than their conventional counterparts. And the even bigger example I will give for Bangladesh. The largest bank Islamic. Now, there is one difference. Jordan and Oman, the central bank is supporting Islamic initiatives significantly. In Bangladesh, the government is supposed to be secular and not supporting Islamic finance in particular by the central bank. The largest bank Islamic, fourth largest Islamic, 27% Islamic market share, no tawarruq, no discount window, no controversial products. Just think of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens different avenues for you. Just start thinking on this ground. We all need to start thinking at our level. As banks, as setters, we all need to think of it, because if you make your niyyah khalis for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will find other avenues. Thank you.
Well, there could not be a better ending to this session. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed and perhaps learned as much as I have. Please put your hands together for a very good panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sohaib, and to all the panelists for a